But see, there was a major expansion of the ice sheets between 25 and 30,000 years ago, roughly.
Oh, right. Okay.
Now, so maybe we could use this opportunity to do a couple more terms. We're talking about a continuum here, but we've got two endpoints on this continuum. We'll define an interglacial as being basically what we're in now. But now a full-on interglacial, which the Earth has actually been in multiple times, would mean that there's essentially no significant accumulated landmass of ice. Therefore, sea levels worldwide are going to be somewhere around 70 or 80 feet higher than they are now during a full-blown interglacial. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about what would probably have prevailed during the last couple of 100,000 years, right? So you've got interglacial on one side, which would be represented by now, right? And then you've got a full-blown glacial, which would have been represented by the last ice age, let's say 15 to 20,000 years ago, right? And obviously the full-blown glacial is going to correspond with the lowest subsidence of sea level, right?
Right.
Now, the climate, in turn, is having to oscillate between those two extremes, right? But those are the extremes, and all of the climatic oscillations do not go to those extremes. So you might have this climate doing this, but sometimes the climate might do this, see? So in order to accommodate this scale of climate change, we introduce a couple new terms. And so we refer to those as a stade and an inter-stade. A stade would be like a glacial, but not as much ice. So maybe half as much ice or 2/3 as much ice. An inter-stadial would mean there is some ice left, but still more than there is today. Like there may be residual ice caps, but much smaller over, say, Canada or Northwestern Europe.
Okay.
Not completely gone like they are now, because there is no perpetual, other than mountain glaciers, there's no perpetual glaciers in Canada anymore, right?
Right.
So you've got interglacial, glacial, interstade, stade. So here's where these terms and these concepts apply. When we go back to the previous, say, period of contracted ice, was it an interstade or an interglacial? Well, it's pretty much agreed that to go back to the full interglacial, we go back around 105 years ago to about 120,000 years ago, which was called the Eemian period, E-E-M-I-A-N, the Eemian period. And this was a period where actually sea levels were probably 10 feet or more higher than now. And this is generally accepted as being the last full-blown interglacial period where there was no more ice on the planet than there is now. Now, the old assumption is that after this last interglacial, you had a slow return, just like Mike was talking about, a slow return of the ice sheet and growth of the ice sheet. But this may have lasted 50,000 to 100,000 years. And then it began to melt away 25 or 30,000 years ago. So it was a much more protracted process back, say, from the year 1900 up to the 1950s and 1960s. But that all began to change when radiocarbon dating data came online, because one of the things that happened was that in many regions where Canada had previously been assumed to be under this unbroken mass of ice for tens of thousands of years, they were finding pollen and seeds and evidence of trees and vegetation and stuff that's dating to 30,000 years ago.
Right.
So now, this has not been done extensively enough to determine, are we talking about a full interglacial here? Probably not. But are we talking about an interstadial? Probably yes, where ice was very much constricted relative to what it became 10,000 years later, right? Now, if that's the case, there should also be a corresponding oscillation in sea levels, right? You know, let's say interglacial, sea levels way up here where they are now. Full glacial, they're down 400, maybe even 450 feet lower. Boom, boom. So interglacial, full glacial. But in between that, you've got interstade, stade, interstade, stade. Because all of the oscillations in sea level are not going to be at these two extreme endpoints of that continuum. You're going to oscillate within that. So in order to address those more complex variations in climate, in glacier formation, in sea level rise and fall, that's the reason for the introduction of these additional terms. So here's the important question. When we go back 30,000 years ago, it is clear that the ice sheets over northern hemisphere were considerably constricted to what they became a short while later. And it seems that the transition from a inter-stade into a more full glacial occurred between 26 and 28,000 years ago. And that by 20,000 years, those ice sheets had reached their full LGM or late glacial maximum. So the implication there is that there was an enormous amount of glacial growth between, say, 26 and 28,000 years and 20,000 years. In fact, much faster than previously had been assumed.
That's not overnight, but that's pretty quick.
It's not overnight, but it's definitely quick. Yeah, it's definitely
it's really
quick.
fast.
In geological terms, it's that, you know.
Right.
So this is important. We're going to come back because that's an important part of the discussion. When we start talking about these great oscillations of climate, we have to come right back to this stuff that we're talking about here, because it all bears directly on the question of climate change. Because obviously, in order for the glaciers to start growing over Canada and in Northern Europe or shrinking, you're talking about an accompanying climate change, a drastic climate change of some kind, driven by something, right? And we're not sure what, but we can speculate fairly intelligently. And one of the things that we can say with almost 100% certainty is it's not carbon dioxide driving those changes. No, I mean, that's right. pretty much easily demonstrable that it's not carbon dioxide. That, in fact, what we can demonstrate is that carbon dioxide fluctuations in the atmosphere are following that, because as the ocean warms, it outgasses CO2, and when it cools, it sucks the CO2 back in. It all has to do with the solubility physics of carbon dioxide. But yeah, so what we see, and again, at some point we're gonna get into that, because this is important stuff, and it's stuff that people do not know, that they need to know in order to have any kind of an informed opinion on this, you know, highly politicized matter of climate change.
Yep.
So not to get too far off, but I think these concepts are important, actually. And if we have these concepts as part of our toolbox, we can come back and talk intelligently about whether or not there could have been such a thing as Atlantis, or whether it's just complete woo. We should forget about it.
Woo's good. I don't have a problem with some woo.
No, listen. What is there's a place for woo. Just like, you know, if you're going to have a piece of cake, sometimes you spread a little frosting on there.
That's right. There you go.
But, you know, the problem is you wouldn't want to have a steady diet, 3 meals a day of frosting. And the sad thing is there's a lot of people, that's what they consume, is frosting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would.
Yeah.
I'd get pretty sick, I think, after the first 2 meals of frosting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I love frosting, and I have to resist because I have a sweet tooth. But now I have finally, at this stage of my life, I think, learned to resist the call of sweets.